I want to call to order the South Carolina Department of Disabilities and Special Needs August meeting. Welcome, she's not here. Let me hear the welcome thing and see if it's in her package. Who's got the welcome? Might be in her package.
It is. It's in there.
Sorry. Where is it? Okay, statement of announcement. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the August 16th, 2018 Commission meeting was mailed August 14th, 2018 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office video conference locations and on the website. Americans with Disability Act. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreter, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance. Could you please give us the invocation, Vicki?
Yes. Let's bow our heads. Thank you, Lord, for this day, for this opportunity to serve as we all come together to do your perfect will. Give us strength, give us wisdom, and show us the way forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
May I please have the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Introduction of guest. Can I start up in the front, please, sir?
Good morning, Chuck Norman, DDSN.
Ben Warner, DDSN. Bill Simpson, DDSN.
Rob Sharstein, Charleston, South Carolina.
Helen Rose, Community Options.
Angela Rodriguez, South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association.
Good morning, Kathleen Roberts, Witness Center Parents Club, and parent of 2 children that were served by Witness Center for 31 years.
Bill Clarkson, I have a son with a brain injury and a member of the Brain Injury Association and the DD Council.
Ray Miller, DD Council.
Sarah St. Ange, Protection and Advocacy.
Stephen Jones, PDSN.
Alan Hassett, Family Connection, South Carolina.
Bob Jones with the Pride Center of the Newberry County Disabilities Board.
Beth Bungie with Bright Start.
Good morning, Mike Keith, Marion Dillon, DSN.
Kelly Cox, parent for child with disabilities.
Stacy Johnson, Rich Legs, DSN Board.
Pike Walls, Calhoun County Disabilities and Special Needs Board.
Stephanie Williams, Calhoun County DSN Board.
Sean Keys, Sumter County Disability Special Needs Board.
Michelle Schaefer, Max Abilities of York County.
Mary Poole, Disabilities of York County.
Ward 1, Baptist Center. Scott Tanner, DHHS.
Jerry Mize, Oconee DSN.
Lynn Zig, DDSN. Melissa Ritter, DSN.
Dexter Alston, DDSN.
Good morning, Kevin Jacoby, DDSN.
Kathleen Lynn, PG McClure.
Daniel Davis, Autism Division.
Thank you and welcome. So glad you're all here. May I have the approval of the minutes of July 19th, 2018 Commission meeting?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sandra, we have, Deborah McPherson.
Let's look at how we got to where we are today regarding assessment tools and waiver caps. The funding band system was implemented under the Butkus administration by assuring families that DDSN would implement person-centered planning and needs would be assessed using a standardized assessment tool called the ICAP. Families were assured that identifying individual resources through the ICAP would apply to new consumers and all current consumers would be grandfathered in at their current resource levels. The funding band system was never approved by the General Assembly. In May 2009, when I was appointed to the commission, we were informed that it was imperative to impose caps on certain in-home services because of drastic budget deficit. DHHS Director Emma Fortner attended the June 2009 commission meeting to deliver the message that all 5,700 waiver participants would lose their services if we did not impose caps on respite, personal care, and nursing services. These arbitrary caps were not based on consumers' need, but rather the predicted serious deficit DDSN would face if the caps were not imposed. Concerned with the impact these caps would have on families, the Commission voted to restore services if funds became available. We now know that agency officials at DDSN and DHHS fabricated the budget deficit alarm. We also know now that within weeks of authorizing caps on services in 2009, DDSN entered into a contract with Robbie Kerr, the former DHHS director, to study DDSN funding band system. I learned years later that the study was probably written by DDSN's recently retired Deputy of Finance, Bill Barfield. Commissioners were assured in this report that the funding band system was compliant with CMS regulations. Kerr later testified that he never contacted CMS to confirm its compliance and that CMS was not even aware of or approved the funding band system. Kerr's study further recommended that DDSN explore the feasibility of adopting the support intensity scale referred to as SIST to facilitate the development of person-centered plans and budget allocations. In June 2012, DDSN started a pilot program to conduct SIS interviews. When family groups across the state complained that they had been promised that their services were grandfathered, Dr. Buscemi at the October 2012 Commission meeting stated that the SIS would be used only as an assessment tool. The Commission approved the use of assessment only as an assessment tool, voting that any use of this SIS to allocate resources must be brought back to the Commission for approval. The Waiver Administration Division was started at the end of October 2017 without Commission approval. In December, the assessment tools and waiver manuals were revised without Commission public input. At the February Commission meeting, Tom Waring responded to a Commissioner's question regarding the cost of this new division as $500,000, which more than likely was the state's share of the total cost. This annual commitment exceeded the state director's expenditure authority and should have been approved by the Commission. I expressed concerns at the March, April, and May Commission meetings regarding the negative impact of service reductions on individuals resulting from reviews conducted by this new division. We're now learning of the 7,707 annual plans reviewed the past 9 months. Services reduced in 9% or 720 annual waiver plans reviewed. 150 plans involve reductions in durable medical equipment covered by Medicaid state plan or individual employment service levels considered by DDSN to be excessive. The remaining 570 plans were reduced due to the new service assessments. I expressed concerns in May that the assessment tools being used were not standardized and the scoring system for personal care been revised to reduce the number of hours indicated as needed. According to CMS, this process was not required by federal regulators. There were no public hearings or opportunities for public input into this new plan review process. 124 of the 570 plans had budgets reducing total $620,000 or on average $5,000 per person. The state proportion of these reductions would have totaled $186,000 or $1,500 per person. For every respite hour reduced, the savings in state funds is only about $3.15 per hour. The $500,000 used to establish the Waiver Administration Division could have been used to provide 158,000 hours of respite to struggling families. The current cap for respite is 68 hours per month, 28 hours for personal care 2, and 6 hours for personal care 1. Any hours not used in a month for respite or during a week for personal care can't be carried over, as was allowed before the caps were imposed in 2010. Personal care and respite hours can't be interchanged. The South Carolina Court of Appeals has required exceptions to the caps where there's risk of institutionalization. But DDSN and DHHS have not established and published standards so that families know of this option or what information they need to provide. Excuses have been made that services in some plans were reduced due to underutilization of services during the prior year. Often it's difficult for families to find qualified providers, especially if their family member has complex needs. These factors, as well as the low hourly pay and the fact that hours can't be carried over, may contribute to hours not being used. Frequently, family members who can't find qualified workers often quit their jobs to provide care. Families usually are not told that they can be paid to provide personal care services for adult consumers if they're not legally responsible. 87% of the individuals served by DDSN live at home with their families or in their own home, yet DDSN only spends 10 to 12% of its budget supporting them. The average Band B contract awarded to providers this fiscal year is $14,285 and capped at $14,086 for those in Band I served through the Community Supports Waiver. The average band payment for those with residential low needs is 4.7 times higher and 6.3 times higher for those with residential high needs in Band G, as compared to those living at home through Bands B and I. I'm especially concerned about the service reductions involving aging caregivers providing care to individuals with complex needs. Exceptions to the waiver caps specified in the waiver manual, as well as physician's orders, appear in some cases to have been ignored. It appears that DDSN would rather squeeze the few supports that families have available to care for their family member with a disability at home, potentially jeopardizing the health and safety of the individual, as well as raising the need for critical residential placement, than providing the supports needed as needed. It will be nearly impossible to find community providers to serve these individuals with complex needs, and if you do, it will cost substantially more than cost of in-home family support. Families provide a lot of uncompensated care and supervision, as well as room and board. My concerns are not based on anecdotal data, but rather on face-to-face encounters with families that have been told their family member services are being reduced. Before any individual services are reduced, staff should go with the local service coordinator to meet with the family and the individual, rather than just making decisions on paper reviews. Better yet, perhaps these staff members should spend more time caring for the individual with a disability. They may have a different perspective once they walked in the caregiver's shoes for a day. Finally, to those who dismiss my concerns regarding these service reductions, I believe I have a track record of bringing legitimate concerns to the Commission, and I'm not going to take time to outline that, but I have a list. I am offended when DDSN staff accuse me of manufacturing issues. I'm a non-paid volunteer with a child not even served by DDSN. I have nothing to financially gain in bringing these concerns to your attention other than I care, and I've walked in the shoes of some of these families. I look forward to our new state director starting work next month. I know that mistakes may be made along the way. I may not agree with her 100% of the time, but I know that she will always strive to do her best, admit when mistakes are made, be willing to openly discuss and work out solutions to the concerns of individuals with disabilities, their families, and advocates. And she's already proven that to me. Thank you.
Rob Sharstein?
Yes.
From Charleston?
Good morning. I'm both a parent of 2 adult children with autism and a retired physician. My son Robert has been in housing in Charleston, South Carolina since 2008. He came to live at Community Options about 2 years ago. And it's been one of the best moves that we've ever done. Robert's much happier. I would say there are far fewer behavioral issues. Unfortunately, during the time towards the end of his stay in the Charleston Disability Board housing, there was an issue of some mistreatment by one of the house staff that was never fully addressed. And yet Robert ended up being hospitalized for 2 weeks in a mental health institution. That was extremely hard, as Robert's verbal capacity isn't the greatest, and he really didn't understand why he was there. But behavioral issues had come so great due to a number of issues there. But more importantly, I want to talk about Community Options and how they've treated Robert, and transition has been such a great improvement. I see Robert twice a week. Every Wednesday I pick him up at work, and Sunday I pick him up for church, and this is regular. So I see him a pretty good bit of the time. He's much happier now. There just aren't as many outbursts or undisciplined behaviors or noises that so oftentimes accompany autism, especially when the individual is stressed. And whatever that distress may be, it can, as a parent, I know Lori has a son with disabilities, and I recently read a Facebook post of you at the Atlanta airport, and I felt your pain. It was very, that's tough when you have a child decompensate, and there's little you can do, and people around you don't understand why you don't start beating your child, which is extremely frustrating. But anyhow, again, Robert's been very happy the last 2 years. I can't say enough good things about the house he lives in. It's a nice neighborhood. There was actually a shooting, I don't remember if the person died or not, across the street from Robert's house when he was downtown. In the suburb he's in now, the houses are much nicer. The guys, it's neat because what they've done there is they have 3 other adults with autism that are all of similar function. Whereas before he was with 2 Down's children and then another adult with autism of higher function. So there was a real incompatibility among their ability levels and what they found interesting. And I think that's important. I know the executive director, Alan Rose, has had a lot of experience in the past dealing with autism, with Carolina Autism, and also I think with SCDDSN. But the fact that he's aware of that when he's placing folks into these homes is I think you can't underestimate the importance, and it's not something that costs money. It's a matter of just making good decisions. I've also been impressed with the staff that they keep. They're are very communicative. They seem to be genuinely caring about the kids. They have a lot of nice social things they do. They have a fundraiser every year called the Cupid's Chase, and 100% of the money goes to things like if they want to take the kids out for ice cream or take them to, I think you told me recently they went to a WWE wrestling match that was a big hit. And it's just nice to see them get to go out and do normal things. So that's the extent of it. You know, we're very happy there. I just want to make sure that you all know that I'm very grateful for what the state of South Carolina has done for my son Robert, and what Community Options is doing now in Somerville is really fantastic.
Thank you very much. All right, the Finance and Audit Committee update. Committee Chair Gary LaMelle.
The Finance and Audit Committee met for its regular update. We got the update with regard to the outcomes of the fiscal year 18 audit in terms of number of audits performed, and that was right on track with where we expected. It also went over the plan for fiscal year 19. That looks also intact. Discussed some more long-term plans. One thing, when we get our, when everyone is situated, I guess Sam finally rotates off, and we have somebody else appointed onto that for a long-term process, talk some with Kevin about putting together a training for our committee as well, so we'll follow up on that as well. But productive meeting and everything appears to be in good shape from what we see on that front.
Great. The Policy Committee update. Vicki Thompson.
Do y'all have handouts yet from, you got them? Okay, good. Fast, Susan. So we discussed the executive limitations policy, and if you'll look at the highlights, and I can try to explain a couple of changes made during the committee meeting. The first one is number 2, describe DDSN organizational structure, and we've crossed that out and instead put hire adequate qualified personnel and implement effective programs. Down under 3C, we have come up with, and I don't think it's written on yours, so I have to read it out loud. Present to the commission positions, programs, and divisions that result in additional positions exceeding $200,000 prior to implementation. And then on the second page, I'm just reviewing the changes. Number 8, crossed out develop directives and put in present draft policies, directives, and standards to the commission for review and approval. Then right under that, number 12 moves up to under that, present to the commission for vote any administrative directives that cause significant changes to the service delivery system or increase restrictions in reporting abuse, neglect, exploitation, critical incidents, or sexual assault prior to implementation. And then still under number 8, different paragraph, present assessment tools to the commission for review and approval if the assessment tool is to be used for resource allocation. Any questions about that one? Number 14, implement an interim policy when faced with a time-sensitive decision. The state director is encouraged to attempt to consult with the executive committee of the commission or the commission chairperson whenever possible to implement the interim policy. And most of these go back to the new policy guidelines we passed last month. And then this was added, director will present the interim policy to the full commission at the next commission meeting. Number 15, director shall present to the commission for approval all proposed new home and community-based waivers, waiver renewals and/or amendments, as well as waiver manuals and policies recommended to HHS at least 30 days prior to submitting the documents to HHS. The director shall advise the commissioners of any matter involving DDSN prior to the matter being considered by the HHS Medical Care Advisory Committee. The director shall keep the commission informed of all matters involving inquiries from CMS regarding DDSN programs and all submissions to CMS involving DDSN programs of which the director is familiar.
Can I ask a question on that last one? What sort of, I just don't know.
What sort of rationale?
What sort of, no. What sort of volume? I don't know how often we get inquiries from CMS. I don't know how often the HHS Medical Care Advisory Committee considers things. I'm just kind of curious when we talk about being advised of this, are we going to be getting hourly notes, weekly notes, monthly notes?
Well, our thinking behind this is it's more important for us to be informed.
Yeah.
And to stand sort of between, in some situations, staff and HHS, so that HHS is not kind of running the staff, since we're supposed to be the governing board and all, as a state agency. So we're trying to get in front of that. Now, I don't know the answer to that question.
Right. I agree 100% with the rationale. I'm just kind of curious how often it's going to, and
I think if it gets to be cumbersome,
sporadic, okay.
common sense would maybe, not every little thing, maybe, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, and that.
They have to tweak it.
Right, well, that's where I say, we may have to.
May have to tweak it.
Susie just indicated it's fairly sporadic, so that's.
And sorry to interrupt you, but it just depends on the project and the status of something. If there's a waiver amendment,
Sure.
if there's a waiver renewal, if there's some new action, if there's a state plan amendment for HCBS, it just depends. There could be a request for additional information. There could be submissions of evidentiary information.
Right.
It could be, at some points it's several times in a month perhaps, and other times it's nothing in a month, but we don't always get all the communications from HHS to respond to, but they are in regular contact, obviously, with CMS.
Right. So, yeah, and it was just, yes, we don't, there's no common sense provision in there, right? And so that may be something that we need to come back after we see how it works to
and
see.
I think along those lines, because there is a lot of minutia and all this stuff on it. And if we could get the possible hot things that maybe we may get pushback on, if you could give us a heads up on that, and then we could make a decision on that, that would maybe expedite us reviewing. And it may not be doable, but we can try and see in order to avoid some of the problems we've been seeing.
No, I'm 100% agree with the rationale behind it. I'm just kind of curious as to what sort of workload we're taking on with
Yeah,
that.
I'm curious about that too.
Because there wasn't any sort of discretionary element to, as it's proposed right now.
I'm worried about having too much discretion.
That's the risk.
You've done
That's,
discretion.
right, I mean, that's the risk you run.
Yeah.
Any sort of discretionary element. Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other discussion on this?
So that's the motion from the policy committee, that those changes to the executive limitations committee.
So in that case, we don't need a second, is that how I understand it?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So one more thing, Madam Chairman. We are going to take up 4 policies at the September Policy Committee meeting, and we're going to be meeting a lot. So our next meeting, and I want to make this announcement because it's part of our policy guidelines, that we will be reviewing Directive 535-07 and 535-14 and 600-05 and 603-03. And special thanks to Beth Bungie, did I get that right? And Deborah McPherson and Mary Poole, and for all their help today. And what we think we had a very productive, I think, meeting, and we think we know how to, and I know we're not going to need your help in that too, Pat, to get these directives worded so that they work for people.
Could you tell me what these, since I don't have those?
They're directives that have to do, that have been already submitted and sent out. And so the change that we're going to make, I'm going to let you tell them what the change is.
Sure, the idea was to reflect, in
What are
this
what are
next
they
version
about?
of the
What are they
draft.
about?
Well, these 4 are entitled, oh my gosh, you don't really want me to read them. But one is obtaining healthcare consent for minors and adults. Second is authorization to discuss medical condition and medical treatment plan. Third, behavior support, psychotropic medications and prohibited practices, and then medical and dental treatment for uncooperative consumers. The idea is, again, they've already been sent out for comment. At least one has been sent out more than once. And the language change that we will hope to capture and obviously verify before we send it out for draft comments is that the prerogative is that families will be contacted to share information about these various issues unless the person indicates not for them to be contacted, trying to emphasize the role of the parent. If the person cannot consent, then the default is to call the parent, legal guardian, or representative. Is that accurate?
That's perfectly accurate.
Okay.
Lori, that summed it up, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that summed it up. The only inquiry I have is to make sure that any policy that we adopt, any language we adopt comports with applicable state and federal law, and I don't know that we have.
Vetted that.
Right, I don't know that we've vetted it.
Yeah, but we're not voting on that today. What we're telling you is, these are the 4 policies that we're going to take up next, and according to the policy guidelines that Interim Director Maley wrote, that's a long time, then according to those, we now submit those out for review with that change in those 4. Then everybody will have 30 days to go in and comment, and then next time the policy committee meets, it will take into consideration all that feedback and all that input before bringing a decision to the full commission to vote on. So that's where we are on that. We're trying to follow the policy committee guidelines as well as we can. If anybody wants to have a policy looked at, you need to let us know. And Susan is going to be really busy this month, but she's also going to try to fix the internet so that people can go in and sign up to be notified when a policy changes at DDSN. You will get an alert if you sign up to be alerted. So when that policy is so that you don't have to hawk the internet to find out if a policy is changing. So that was the policy committee report.
Any other comments? No. All right, Pat, how about State Director's report?
On July 30th, we presented in front of the House Legislative Oversight Committee DDSN's performance management system. It was well received, and they scheduled the next House Legislative Oversight Committee meeting on August 30th. And on August 30th, they're going to want DDSN's recommendations that they should consider that goes into their final report. So this is an important meeting, and if it all goes well, it could be our last meeting with them. So I have it in draft. I'm meeting with them tomorrow to shape it to the level of detail or that meets their needs as well as our needs. And once I get a draft, probably early next week, I will send it to all the commissioners, and then we will collectively have to decide whether we have to hold a telephone meeting to approve it, or whether I get input and the chairman approves it, but certainly I need some concurrence from this body before I make recommendations on our behalf for the changes. But most of the changes will be the ones that have been occurring throughout the spring and are not surprises, and they're all in the areas of just what do we need to improve. And there's 3 or 4 major ones, and then there's a number of what I would consider individual initiatives of how to improve and make recommendations. The budget in.
I'm sorry, she skipped commissioner's input.
Okay. I'll do it right after.
You sure?
Thank you. No, go ahead.
I defer
go
to
ahead.
you.
No, no,
You sure?
no, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I
I always skip something. I want to make sure y'all on your toes.
We're entering the legislative budget season. Our budget is due to the Executive Budget Office for the governor's first review on September 21st. I've sent a draft out with some ideas and I got some input. I've sent it out to the associations for input. We're tightening that up, adding numbers and adding language, and we certainly haven't prioritized it yet. And once we get a little bit tighter version, we'll have to have some mechanism, but we have time until next commission meeting on September 20th. And of course, new State Director Poole shows up on September 4th, and this will be on her desk, and certainly she will want to have a large input as to what you ultimately get presented and priority in that order. So that is coming. Additionally, we have the annual spending plan that will be presented in September. Same thing, we'll have it ready for new State Director Poole, and it will be a spending plan that has to have a higher level of precision and engineering to it. As I'll get to my Finance Committee report, we don't have a lot of margin for error. This year, we spent a lot of our cash. Some of our revenue didn't come in as planned. We still have cost settlement issues to address, so it needs to be we don't have margin for error in our budget, so we have to make sure it's as tight as it can so we can't overshoot the runway. On August 6th, I had the pleasure of presenting the Golden Palmetto Awards to Lexington County and Williamsburg County for the great service to local boards. It was well attended by county officials, and it was in Hilton Head, and Rufus was there, and somehow, Rufus, we didn't get to spend the night there, so we're doing something wrong. I know that, but it was a beautiful day, and it was just they really appreciate being recognized because they spend so much time in the day-to-day grind to provide employment opportunities for our consumers that it does not go unnoticed, and it is appreciated. Each month, we're tracking the case management market rate issue. I think you've been tracking it, and I'm trying to give you a little blast so you can stay up with it, but we sent out last month's productivity report, for lack of a better word. When we started this back in April, I would say the band rates, the monthly payments that we paid per consumer was $138. Providers' ability to create billings to pay us was about at 30. They needed to increase, they're at 30%, they need to increase to 70% to get break even. And a lot of effort has been going on, a lot of elbow grease, and they've gone from 30% to 47%. We have at least one at 90%. So we are moving up. It is it's kind of like spring training. We're just re-energizing our billable capacities and making sure people feel confidence, and that will hit a certain plateau this fall. You will introduce, HHS will introduce, along with us, waiver case management sometime this fall. We talked to them the other day, and it's the first chance I had to talk about it. And that will provide additional opportunities for billing. How much it helps close making this a revenue neutral issue is problematic, but I don't think it's going to close the gap. And at some point, we're going to get to a point where HHS has been very flexible with the starting of the market rate, which would be a 25-15 rate, which is $25 per 15-minute increment face-to-face, $15 for face-to-face. They have every expectation of implementing that at some time. And the only caveat to this is that they've assured me that in the Mercer rate study, they will look at case management. And the question is, when is that study going to be done? And the information I got was they want to look at all the rates at the same time and kind of roll them out together because of our capitated model and the way we keep costs. It's just, if I look at this rate and I look over here and the costs don't match up, it's just better to do it all at once. So you're not saying, oops, we didn't consider that, and adjust them. So when those rates come out, whether it's January, February, or March, sooner rather than later, we will have a fresh rate. So I think that is healthy. And then the last thing we talked about was conflict-free case management, and Director Baker was very, very clear, and we have to get the exact wording from him, but he wants this whole market rate issue to be done, absorbed, and the financial health of the system has to be in place and steady before we even enter the conflict-free case management mechanisms. And I think everybody is seeing what a great risk we are as a state. And I think the latest thing that we're looking at is other states have done this, but I do think we are unusual in that we have 75% of all of our case managers tied to boards, and boards provide services. So I think we are probably on the far end of the bell curve of being most impacted by this conflict, because many of our counties only have one service provider and one case manager. So I think everybody's realized that we are maybe a unicorn that has to be handled in a way, but I know it's not going to be sprung upon us during this fiscal era that's going to cause another impact. But we need to stay on top of this every month, because as we get closer to that rate, boards may make business decisions as to, I'm getting out of the business. So I say that a lot of good news is coming in the right direction, but this is far from over. We still have to be in a position to make all these things together so that we don't create an environment where there's a big drop off of people interested in providing case management. So that's the direction, and I think the biggest factor that gives me confidence is they're going to do a fresh rate study. So if you do a fresh rate study and you do it accurately, you will capture what it takes. And I can say our spring training over the last 4 months has given us a lot of experience as what it takes. So I think we're in a posture to give them good data for the rate. Mercer's having its 4th stakeholder meeting on the 22nd. There's one more scheduled, and they'll be done with the stakeholder meetings. Annual accountability reports due on September 15th. The state auditor came in and did an audit of our accounting department, and they did agreed upon procedures. They looked at your traditional procurement, and the audit was fine. I think you got emailed a copy of it. There were 2 small findings that I won't even go into, but they were a little technical, but I went through them and they were just very de minimis findings. So I thought very minor. So I thought that was a good sign. And my last topic, I'll talk a little bit about it, which is the annual plan authorization process, the waiver administration division. I sent out 2 directives, or not directives, but interim policy decisions to address some of the concerns in the system. I sent one out on August 2nd, which was basically talking to the commissioners like, look, we need to look at this program. We have a new state director coming. Let's let Director Poole get on board with her experience from both sides of the equation. So we put something out to improve the process, improve communications. And a week later, we said, no, we just need to pause the process so that we do not use the respite instrument in particular until we have one that is what we feel confident measures accurate needs. So we paused the system. The system's going to keep on going as it did before. The only distinction is when case managers provide their consumers waiver plan, which includes the budget, we're just going to do some compliance testing to make sure that the number's in the right place, and we're just not going to apply those criteria. They will accept the responsibility during the 60 to 90-day period, and then afterwards we will implement a respite as well as any other process issues that we need to address. And then we are going back for 2 groups. One group, people that had their budgets reduced. Again, when they were reduced the budgets, utilization of the budget was not a factor in the decision. It's just the instrument was the instrument. It just so happened they were reduced and they had not used it last year. And then there's 124 people that actually had utilization below. The budget this year was less than last year. And I'll hit on what Deborah said is we do have to remember the past. And when you go from a new system, whatever system you have, you can always make it better. And I think one of the things that we didn't hit on was we should have built a better safety net around those 124 people so that when we saw them, they never fell below that utilization rate. Because I think that's, even if it affects one person, that's a problem. And in a system like ours, where there's so many vulnerable people, if we had just managed that a little bit better, I think we could have taken some of the surprise out of it. And, but at the end of the day, we'll take a look at it, and Mary comes on board, and we'll do the rest of it, and look at the process and move forward. Any questions?
Nope. Copy of that state audit final report.
Sure, sure.
Okay. I am sorry, but we have a commissioner's update. So it's a good thing that I skipped it. All right, Miss Joan Cooper. Consideration of bids, winter, Whittington. How are you? So nice to see you.
Okay. On August 2nd, DDSN took bids on state project J169894, Witten Center, building demolitions for 3 buildings, which includes vehicle services building, regional office, and the 2-story staff residence. And it's recommended that a contract be awarded to complete demolition services of Carlton, Georgia, in the amount of $216,900. This contractor has performed work for DDSN on a recent past project and has a proven record of responsible performance.
Nobody from South Carolina wanted to bid on it? Just
No,
curiosity.
they're South Carolinians. We've received 6 bids.
I know.
Yeah.
I would like to see somebody from South Carolina bid, but
And
I understand.
we had to dispose of 1 bid because they did not list a subcontractor properly, so, but.
all right. We have some questions?
I'm wondering when the commission approved this. I'm looking at time frame.
It was 1 building and then later another building and then another building. So it was over a period of 3 different approvals.
And how many, over a period, how many years?
I can't answer that.
I'm guessing many.
It's been several years.
So were we waiting till
Ms.
we had?
Roberts, do you know when it was? When we approved?
It's been a while.
I mean, it's been like 4 or 5 years?
Probably.
Because I don't ever remember anything being,
So I mean, did we wait until all 3 of
Yeah,
them?
we had an engineer working on it, and he passed away. And we've been trying to fill the position, and we haven't done it, and we finally are catching up to getting it done. And then there are a lot of approvals in this to get it done. You have to get approval downtown, you have to get asbestos studies done, and it's just, it's a drawn-out process.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just, it's 3 different approvals and we combined them. And
We
I'm,
did.
yeah. And so what I'm getting at here is it would be nice if we had like a router where we closed that loop and we looked at, this is when we approved it and what is the status of it?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So I move that we approve the suggested bid of $216,900 for the complete demolition services of Carrollton.
do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Pat, you want to talk to us about the provider contract? Thank you very much.
I'm asking to increase Babcock's contract by $896,000. The reason I'm here is, like most things involving the band, there's a long story and explanation behind why I'm here. And I have Chuck right here, my backup, for the details. This is a situation, and again, I think it's first of all, I have to explain why we're doing it, and secondly, the lessons learned. The way the band system works, it is just it's a series of contracts that we agree upon, and then there's intermittent activity of people coming and going, and 3 months later, we do a snapshot. And we do a snapshot, we look at all the real-time activity that's happened, we update the contracts, we reimburse them for expenses incurred between the 2 points, and then the going forward number. It's a constant series of reconciliations, and it is a very tedious, cumbersome process with a lot of wheels that creates a margin for error. The increase for Babcock is 2 issues. The one issue, when you look at the top, is the budget issues Band Bs and Band Is. This is unique to Babcock, where the waiver administration process establishes new bands. People come into the system, they're at-home bands. They go through waiver enrollment and they get set up, and they place where the band physically resides. And the physical, we click mainly because early in the waiver administration division, we had new people, and they click Rich Lex as the holder of the band. Well, as we all know, Rich Lex is a case management, and they don't hold bands. It is a board. It's one of the anomalies. They go to Babcock. So throughout the year, we were assigning, Babcock was paying for consumers of which they were not getting reimbursed. And at the end of the year, when we reconciled, we made that determination. So now we have to make an adjustment back to Babcock to increase their contract to account for these bands that they were getting last year that weren't booked on the contract. That's it. That's change one. The second change has to do what we call download issues. And the explanation there is about every 3 months, we have systems come together, an access database that shows what's the current condition of every board's bands. Then we reconcile it with the prior 3 months, and we identify the changes. And then the changes, literally by hand, are identified. And then we add them to the new contract and pay them for the intermittent activity. Last year, we had a point where we pulled that report and we had the date wrong. So it didn't capture that activity. So what ended up happening was we did not, again, reflect in the band system payments to the boards. And it affected Babcock to the tune of $358,000. It did affect other boards to a much lesser extent that did not trigger a $200,000 increase. So when you put these 2 issues together, along with what we call normal waiver activity is just anytime there's a change between these 2 snapshots. And that's something that we normally pay no matter what. So when you add up all those changes, we are increasing Babcock's contract that was effective July 1st by $896,000. Is that correct? To account for these 2 errors last year. So the increase is due to those 2 issues, and the predominant factor in both of those are the at-home waivers, the Bs and Is that we're pushing through the system are showing up at Babcock, and that's where when somebody shows up, they get $14,000. So that is why we're increasing the contract. It's over $200,000, and I am asking permission to increase Babcock's contract to reflect transactions last year.
Do you have any questions?
Is there an adjustment to Rich Lex? Because as I understand it, they were getting keyed in there, but it wasn't part of what we were budgeting.
They did not physically get the money. It was like sending an email to someone who didn't open the email. Is that correct?
Right. There's no money for Rich Lex.
There was no.
The money actually didn't get to Rich Lex. I understand that. But was it budgeted?
No.
Rich Lex at all at that point?
No.
So it just kind of, where'd the money go?
Limbo.
The money was just stuck in transit?
There was no money attached to it. It was just a number.
I understand.
And again, if it was to another board, they would say, hey, this doesn't belong to us. And again, a lot of those little reconciliation issues happen all the time. That's part of the cumbersome nature of the bands. So I guess I look at this, and we can talk about this, but we'll go ahead and ask more questions before I close on this.
So go ahead.
So this date issue affected more than Babcock?
The date issue totaled $2.4 million.
And it was a $2.4 million error because
Yes.
from date on.
Oh,
Okay, so, have other, I guess they were under 200,000.
Yes, that's
yes.
correct.
So then you're gonna have they been made whole?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, just wondering, where's that $2.4 million coming from?
It's coming from this year's.
That's why we're lean and mean this year, because one of the.
That's just one more reason we have to be leaner and meaner this year.
Okay, okay.
It happens this is a normal, the
A normal settle.
the normal churn
Yeah.
expected. This is just two mistakes that did not get captured correctly. And I'll go into my editorial thing because this is.
Yeah, because
the last commission meeting.
I'm assuming that you are working on a plan so that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's called the new payment system review.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, but the date, I mean, how can we miss the date?
I mean,
It's, put it this way, if this was a routine accounting function, you'd say, who dropped the ball?
Right.
yeah,
I look at this as, the band system over time has like, it is a spreadsheet operation that blends spreadsheets together, that gets integrated in access databases, of which then manual manipulation is required to make the wheels turn. When you have that many transactions and that many people touching the same issue, you're gonna have human error. The question is, if the human error happens, the beauty of the system is we reconcile and true up these contracts 7 times a year. So any mistake gets trued up fairly quickly. But at the same time, it takes an enormous amount of effort. Any providers out there want to give me an amen how much effort it takes to reconcile okay? So when you look at all the pros and cons, a big con is the machinery that drives the band system. And it's not only on our side, it's on their side. And I would say this particular case, you know, you have new people in the field. If the affected provider had an experienced person there for many years, they might have caught this right away. If they have a new person, it goes through the system and someone catches it. My point for the whole band system is, we've talked a lot about it, but sometimes we got to look at the infrastructure and the time and energy that it takes from us. And we cannot discount that as a major negative effect of the current band system and the risk for error. I don't want to start having a band conversation. We'll be here another hour, but it is just another factor as to.
I just think accounting errors, or accounting being a very finite skill, you know, if you will, it's just a big old error. You know, I mean, you know, it's just big. And I don't know I don't know if it's in the counties or where it is, and maybe we can just say, well, the new payment system will take care of it and not worry about it. But at some point in time, you know.
It's an error. There's someone pushed a button, got a report and didn't have the appreciation that they pushed 17 versus 18. And they ran the numbers and they didn't have enough awareness to see, hey, something's not right here. And where this surfaces is, you generally have someone with 20 years experience looks at it, doesn't look right. And then a little inquiry says, hey, we missed this. And again, I think an error is an error. I would just argue that in a traditional organization with debits and credits and payments and bills, it's a much simpler operation than the unofficial capitated model that we run, and with all the unnecessary moving parts that is just, quite frankly, was built at a time where we don't have the people or the historical legacy people to operate. We have 3 people in this building that have comprehensive knowledge of the bands, and one of them is retiring. It is a real risk to the organization to maintain the band system.
Did we discover the mistake or did Babcock?
I think we.
It was a combination of a couple of providers that called about folks that they weren't getting paid for. And we began to research it and found that there were several missing on the down. We've talked about this at the commission meeting in June. We presented the annual contracts. There's a note on the bottom of the contract approvals that there's a $2.6 million error that we were trying to correct. Well, this is part of that 2.6. But it came about as a provider called us and said, hey, I didn't get paid for this person. Could you check and see what's going on? And then we began to research it and found out that the whole nature of this problem. And that's typically what happens. You know, when a provider doesn't get paid, they'll call us and let us know. And then we'll research it and find out what's going on.
Right.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. You want to continue?
I'll do the finance.
Yes.
This is month one, so we have plenty of money. But the analysis that we did do is, I want to thank Lisa and her team did double duty to crank the schedule at the bottom. And last year, what we're going to do is every year, we want to do year after year analysis, so we're always on top of how much money is our money going to direct services versus indirect costs. And if we look at the schedule, last year we were at 95.48% direct service. It went up to 95.90. And if you look at the pluses and minuses, because you want to see why the needle moved, the needle moved up. The main reason it went down is we just spent, last year in 17, we spent $3 million on capital projects, and last year we had budgeted $2 million. During the year, we spent $1 million, and because, again, the cash was so short at the end of the year, our ending cash balance included $1 million of capital. We held that to the last moment of the last day as a cushion, and then on July 1st, we paid that $1 million out. So it bumped it up, so it's really a little bit less, but it's immaterial. The biggest increase in indirect services was two factors. One, we spent about $1 million on generators that we didn't spend in the prior year, 1.3, and that came out of those accounts. And then we also spent the Alliant contract went up by about $387,000. They were the big changes. But other than that, everything looked about the same, plus or minus some percentages.
Just because I'm living with the house next door being raised 6 feet and it's, shaking to death. How are we doing on generators? Because we're getting ready to go into great hurricane season.
We just sent a report out 2 months ago, and I don't have it in front of me, but.
Anything know about it?
She's gone, she's
She's
gone.
gone.
She's traveling. She has to get PD.
I will get you that answer, but
It looked good, the last report.
I know, I just want to, I said, I know it'd been sent out, but I want to make sure that we have.
I will give you an update after the meeting. I don't have it in front of me, but
Okay.
it's the tippy top of the list.
All right. Right, that means we won't have a hurricane, so.
Hey,
Huh?
if that accomplishes that.
I hope. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions of Pat as she sits down? All right, Susan Beck, the FY 18 monthly report, waiver process performance.
What you need there.
This is,
We can. There's one thing we're gonna get.
Got a little projector warm-up issue there. I'll note that your report's in tab 6. You can also flip over to tab 7 where you see our critical needs list numbers. We've been asked to report those monthly, so I've provided that quick report for you as well. I have a very brief report today. As you know, you receive these numbers every month in your binder. That's my time to showcase them, but it will be brief today. I have 3 main slides and points to cover just to kind of further explain some of these numbers. So on our first slide, we're looking at available waiver slots, as I've provided that blue circle there. Just looking from 3 months ago to now, the fluctuation in those numbers. With the CSW, the community supports waiver, what we're seeing there is that fluctuation from 377 available waiver slots 3 months ago to now 387 slots. That's an effect of that overextension that the commission approved because of the delays in the IDRD waiver and renewal. We're still catching up on the overextension of the funded slots. And that's for every 3 slots, we put 2 back in circulation and then we hold 1. So that's how we're catching up with it. The status of that is we're still about 255 short of catching up. We're at 495 of the 750 overextension. on CS. So that explains why that number looks a little bit different. When we shift over and look at the head and spinal cord injury waiver numbers, available slots, and IDRD waiver, you see that from 3 months ago to now, those numbers have gone down. And that's really just an effect of awarding new slots as they become available and folks in the process of then being enrolled in the waiver. Okay. Moving on to my second slide. Here we're looking at the pending waiver slots. And pending, again, just as a refresher, those are those slots that have already been awarded. The case manager process has begun, where they're actively going through the necessary paperwork, processes, coordination, and decisions to get the person ultimately enrolled and begin receiving waiver services. So this puts a lot of time and effort on the case management system to coordinate, follow compliance requirements, and timelines. As we see here, these numbers follow the same trends as they have for quite a long time. The average days pending remain higher than we would, of course, like them to be. We've put a variety of efforts in place to try to shorten those numbers. But again, the folks that are out there for an extended period of time who have not made the decisions or have not yet enrolled because of that case management process or those decisions that have to be made do prevent new folks from having the opportunity to then access that waiver. So we're interested in speeding up this process as much as possible. So I'll provide an update with you on the endeavors. Apparently my blue circle has decided to go low, but it was not like that when I sent it. It just wants to go low. Process improvement initiatives, I'll just provide a very, very brief update on those. We have 6 of them listed. We've made very good progress on, I'd say 5 of the 6, really focusing on speeding up the pending process. One idea was to look at kind of pre-processing folks on the waiting list, making sure that they had everything in a row, everything lined up, they were Medicaid eligible provided prior to being awarded a slot. And our coordination with DHHS has been very positive on that, but it is a complicated situation to work out because as the waiver documents are written, the person awarded the slot is the next person from the waiting list. So we have to kind of finagle the processing criteria, look at how DHHS does it with processing criteria and their other waivers, and make sure we're compliant and fair to everyone. So we continue to work on that one, which I think is more complicated than the others. We are making sure that a case manager is assigned when a slot is awarded. That was an easy one. Making sure that individuals are educated prior to slot award. So if the case managers are already assigned while the person's on the waiting list, they're getting that education about, think about the services you may need. Start lining up a respite provider if we think that that's going to be a service. But doing all those preemptive things to really speed it up once the clock starts ticking, once the slot's awarded. One of our most recent approvals, as we had discussed prior, we've been working on was as folks switch from the community sports waiver to the IDRD waiver, if they were enrolled in CS to ID, there's been this kind of compliance process to redo the level of care justifying their needs. And so looking at that with Department of Health and Human Services, they've approved so that we did not have to do that again. We do not have to repeat. They can just kind of do a review of existing data. And so that should go into effect very shortly. The manual update was approved by DHHS on August 2nd for that to occur. And then lastly, the 6-month limit on awarded slot without enrollment. That's really important because, again, as I said, those slots that have been awarded and the amount of time, remember the numbers on the previous slides, in the 200s and approaching 300 days, folks are holding on to slots longer than necessary. And so what we're trying to do is put policies in place for families to understand that, kind of all those preemptive things, but eventually they've got to make a decision about whether to pursue the waiver or to not pursue it. So I just want to forecast that whenever there are changes like that go into play, there are some folks that find that pleasing and folks that find that displeasing. We will feel the effect of that probably in January because the policies went into effect in July. So that would, and I say policies meaning the practice.
would go into effect. So for 6 months to elapse, that would then be January. So that's my update on those. I feel like we're making good progress. We've been able to make some changes, and I think in the coming months we'll see those pending waiver numbers change, but bear with us because it takes a lot of effort.
Susan, who's communicating that 6-month limit? How's that being?
We have routine communications with providers when there are manual updates, and so that goes through that normal channel. The Department of Health and Services, Health and Human Services approves it, and then we would send it forward.
No, I'm talking about you
Yes.
need to find somebody that their 6-month timer is that.
Case managers work with families and go through those intermediate timelines to lead them to making decisions in a timely fashion. So that's an effect of the case manager's role.
So, can I just ask, how's intake doing?
Intake is doing well. What aspect of intake are you interested in?
Well, I mean, since we sent it to is that working out, or I hadn't heard about it, in the last couple of months?
There are patches of issues with timelines, of course. The front end part with DDSN, receiving the request and then sending out to providers is very, very quick. When we get the information in on our side, it comes back in just a matter of days and a determination's made. We still do have some issues sometimes with the actual local intake provider handling the request for records and getting records in a timely fashion, but the process is really very fast overall.
I love this screenshot report here. That's great.
Good, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Let me just jump on this one thing, and that is, a lot of the processes we have, we've got to learn from history. At some point, as we move forward, that 6-month rule is going to become a hard rule. And we're backing up education 4 months before they get it. We're doing all the things that mitigate it. But there will be some consumers who will be inconvenienced, and you will hear about it. And I think one of the problems that we have not done correctly is we got to communicate that. Whatever we think we're communicating, we got to go 10 times higher. Because what ends up happening is if we forget about it, all of a sudden you start getting the noise and there's a problem. This is not a problem. The case managers universally, at least from the people I talk to, they wanted that 6-month kind of rule to encourage consumers to either enroll or not enroll, because you are holding up the line. But that's kind of an artificial date. We had to do things. So we've done everything we can before and after to make that a reasonable target, and the implementation is 6 months. And we could go faster. I think if we went faster, we undermine the whole system. And so the goal here, in my opinion, is when we get through this bubble we have, and the biggest problem is our level of care duplication from CS waiver to the IDRD waiver, we got to be in a position that we can measure our system and that we can ask the General Assembly, if you give us 1,200 slots, we'll put 1,200 to work. Because until we do that, I tell you, they're going to look at us with a jaundiced eye. So we have about, if we double time, we can work off our backload in 18 months. That's my guess. But we got to be in a position to know our system so well that we can get it done. So we can do it every year. They'll trust us. But until we get that straight, I think we hurt ourselves. And that's our goal, is to make it predictable.
The 6 months is not a hard rule currently. There's no rule.
There's no rule.
We initially put out guidelines for case managers. Just kind of recapping, Pat did some talking with providers and case managers about the idea of introducing timelines. So case managers had some kind of anchors to kind of guide the timelines of their process. We put those out as guidelines for several months for case managers to get used to and begin using, give us feedback on, and now they're actually moving forward. So this has been a process over a variety of time, and I've had it in my reports for a while now too. So now it will actually be part of more of a compliance requirement as part of the process.
I just want to make sure that people, it's one thing if you're on a 6-month timer and it runs out.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to hear from is the people saying this was not effectively communicated to us.
Yes,
I think that goes back to what you
It's our
I
biggest
mean,
problem.
that's the timeline. Anytime you cut people off, you're going to get negative reactions from the people who were cut off and
Exactly.
everything. I mean, and I'm not sure I understand, and maybe this is something you can feel, why are people holding for this? I mean, what is it? It's cause, some of it's just inaction, right? But is that,
Respite's the number one reason.
Sometimes finding a respite provider, you know, when we talk to our case management providers, these are some of the things they tell us. You know, there's difficulty finding a respite provider because you have to find the right fit.
Right.
To trust your loved one with, to take care of your loved one when you're not there. And so that can be an issue. They've also held off on doing some of the compliance just requirements because there are some timelines that are triggered. Like you have to complete level of care 30 days prior to the enrollment date. So if you do them too soon, but level of care happens usually very quickly. And then, you know, case managers have said too, families are having a hard time making decisions about what they're interested in receiving. They're balancing, do I really want to enroll in the IDRD waiver? As we've shared before in some other reports, there are a lot of school-age individuals that are coming from waiting lists trying to enroll in waiver. Many of their needs are met by state plan, Medicaid services or school-age services. So then when they are looking at the waiver, there's this requirement that you receive a certain amount of services every month. You all know that. And so disenrollment can occur if you don't receive the service every month. So there are many factors, as well as Medicaid eligibility, financial verification, some disability work with VR. There are a variety of different reasons that folks just decide to hold on to it, or, you know, they've got those variables that have to work out.
I mean, I'm a consumer that would have, if there had been a 6-month rule, we would have lost the IDRD waiver when we were going through with my son. And I certainly had no qualms about whether we wanted to get him on the IDRD waiver. We did, for sure. But it was so unbelievably complicated and convoluted, and multiple case managers turning over during the time period. They had to start all over.
That's a big issue.
The case manager would say, oh, I need to be with Ryan, but I stop work at 4 o'clock. Well, he didn't get home until 4 o'clock. I have to do this in person. I mean, just the complications are unbelievable to get through the process.
Yeah.
Especially if you're 2 working parents and, you know, the children are not available at every hour of the day, and the family's not available at every hour of the day. It's just very convoluted.
Right, and that's the concern. I mean,
And I would have been hopping mad if I had had to go back to the beginning of the waiting list, since we waited for 7 years to get.
And your point is well taken. If, as case managers implement this, you know, the idea is that they're educated along the way. As we, as staff in the process, as we're working through the slot awards and educating people while they're on the waiting list, we will make sure that we highlight that as well. If you had known you had 6 months, I mean, perhaps it could have worked differently. I can't guarantee that it would, and I don't mean to indicate it absolutely would, but without individuals knowing there is a beginning and there's kind of a rough timeline we're trying to work in, we don't have the benefit of knowing if some of those decisions or behaviors can change over time. So we will certainly always have a sort of consideration and exception process for individuals in an extenuating circumstance, so it isn't, you know, 6 months you're out, but that would have to be considered very carefully, because otherwise you have a requirement that you're never implementing.
The 6 months would be patently unfair if you don't fix the system.
Yes.
And the main thing is, there's 3 main things. If you don't have Medicaid, you do not get an enrollment slot. That's what comes up 20% of it. The second thing is the timing. 4 months before you get your waiver slot, you will be given the instructions. This is what the IRS is going to need. And if you need respite, start looking now so that you have advance notice. And then ultimately, when we start, the area I saw the most jumble up was we had this notion where we're assigning a case manager, IRS, the Medicaid gets notice, and they have to do a financial look back. The first person talking to our consumer is a HHS person for financial look back. So they have like 2 case managers. So we've untangled that so that we are number one. They come after us. But if we don't all have a structured way of doing it, you're never going to get the 6 months. But if you do it the structured way, you can get to 6 months without a problem. And then you need a soft deadline that if someone has a reason, you should extend it forever. Just need at least a mild speed bump to encourage people you are holding up someone else.
Yeah.
And so I think it will get better. It won't triple in speed, but I think you can double it in speed. And we just got to get to some happy place where we know what we've done all we could do so that we can get appropriations, because I know they are jaundiced toward providing us until we get that organized.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about closing the loop on stuff to make sure that it's working the way that we want. I mean, this is one of those things that I think that come January, we need to start getting regular reports on how this loop is, how many people is this affected? Is it 3 people? Is it 100 people? Is it 500 people?
Sure.
We, you know, because what we don't want is 3 years from now, suddenly hear that 3,500 people have been affected by this and we didn't know. I mean, yeah, this is something, when we're making a decision like this is, in my opinion, something that we as a commission need to be, that's a loop closing kind of issue.
You want to hear about.
Yeah, I want to know what
results of it, the impact of it.
Yeah.
If it's changed behavior to get more folks
Yes.
involved in 6 months, and we'll have a way to do that.
Yes.
But I will
Yeah.
absolutely make sure that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, is putting that in, getting the behavior that we want, that number's coming down.
Right.
That's right. That's the ultimate loop close.
Anybody else have any other questions? Y'all, at this time, we are, I need
Can I
a,
say something?
oh, I'm sorry.
I want to thank Pat Naley. This is your last.
Oh, that's
meeting.
right, this is your last.
And you know, he could have not done this, knowing he was going to get battered and bruised, but he stepped up when we really needed him to step up. Everybody in the state needed him to. And, you know, he could have coasted as an interim. He could have coasted right through this thing, but he didn't. He's been fully engaged the whole time. So I'd just like to thank Pat Naley for all of it.
Yeah, we did it. Oh. Made it time. At this point, I need a motion to go into executive session to discuss a contractual matter and also an employment matter.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.